Hey everybody, my name is Lori Gidding. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon.
Hey everybody, Cliff Gooding. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Well, it's certainly good to be here this morning. I'm reminiscent about 10 years ago. I got a call from up in Manhattan, Kansas, and they had lost their speaker for their group anniversary. It was like their 60th anniversary, and that was a big deal. And they said, will you come? And I said, well, sure, because I'd drive 200 miles on a bicycle to hear myself talk back then. And I got there and found out it was Clancy they had asked, and they had rented out this about 1,000-seat auditorium. When they found out Clancy wasn't coming, about 100 people showed up. So that's kind of how I feel today. We're just scattered out here. I want to thank Jimmy particularly and the entire committee for inviting Lori and I to be here this weekend. Just wonderful. It's such an honor and privilege to be asked to come do this and to be part of this weekend. And so I thank you all for your gracious hospitality and being so kind to Lori and I already. A lot of people think we're from Boston, but we're not. And trying to figure out what we were going to do for this workshop today. There's a phrase in the big book. It talks about this. It says, a much more important demonstration of our principles lie before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And, it also talks back in the chapter Work with Others, it talks about that, if the man doesn't want what we have, we offer this way of life to the family. An obligation that we have, sometimes overlooked piece of our literature about that. So we're going to talk today, and Lori and I are trying to come up with that. I remember when Jimmy called and said, what's the topic of your workshop? And I asked Lori, I said, what do you want to do? She said, what's my message? I thought, well, okay. And I remember I told Jimmy, he goes, well, we'll just see what y'all have, whatever. So, and to be honest with you, we're just going to see where it meanders. And so we're not going to torture you here for 3 hours straight. We'll do about 50 minutes. We'll break 10 minutes and come back, and then we'll try to get you out of here by noonish, right at 12, so we can get everybody to lunch, because you'll probably be a lot more interested in that right around noontime than this. More enthusiastic than the ice cream social, probably. So anyway, we're really grateful to be here and just be with you guys this weekend. So Lori's going to kick us off.
Hey everybody. So the reason why we were thinking about this topic is because and if you are here to hear my story, you're going to hear this again, so be patient with me. When I went to do my fifth step with my sponsor, right before I went, the day before, we were remodeling our kids' rooms. And the only thing left to do in our daughter's room was to get her bedding. And it was like fall break. And I was at work and Cliff was at home, and he gave me a call at... I got to move the mic down for you. You're kidding me. You can't. I've never been told I have not been able to be heard. So anyway, that
I can vouch for that.
That kind of makes me feel good. My dad would be shocked, but anyway, he's rolling over in his grave right now. Anyway, so we had to get her bedding, and it was fall break, and I was at work, and Cliff had called me, and he said, "Guess what we did today?" And I said, "What?" He said, "We went and got Rachel's bedding." And my first thought was, "How dare you? How dare you do that without my permission or my input or my whatever?" And, I didn't say that because by that time I did have a sponsor. So I just said, okay, and I hung up the phone, and I went home that night, and I said, well, show me what y'all got. And so they did. They brought it into the kitchen. I remember it like it was yesterday. And they showed me, and I looked at it, and I said, you know what? I said, this color doesn't match her room. And I said, this material is so thin, she's going to tear it up in no time, and you spent way too much money on that. And, he was trying to do a kind, decent thing, and I just ripped him apart right in front of his daughter. And the next day, I took that stuff, and I threw it in the trunk of my car, and I went to go, because I was going to take it back because I know better, right? And I went to go do my fifth step. And I'd started on my fifth step. We hadn't gotten very far before she stopped to go get a drink, and she came back in the room, and she said, now listen, she said, is there anything that you want to talk about that maybe is not on this fifth step that might have happened. And I thought, my first thought was, oh my God, he called her. And and I said yes, and she said, what happened? And I told her about the bedding. And she said, do you know what you did when you did that? And I said, yes, once again, I had to be in control and I had to be right. And I had to have my way, and I know better. And she said, no, that's not what you did. She said, when you told her that color didn't match her room, you told her opinion didn't matter. And when you told her that material was so thin she'd tear it up in no time, you let her know that no matter what decision she made for the rest of her life, you would always know better than her. And when you told her it was too expensive, you told her she wasn't worth it. And that has made a huge impact on me ever since. And it's made a huge impact on a lot of people when I tell that story. That's usually the one thing that people come up and want to talk to me about. And the reason why what's my message is so important is because I think there's a lot of things and a lot of instances and a lot of things that we say and do that the message that we give is not the one that we are intending to give, but it's absolutely the one that they receive. And I had no idea. And I'd been doing that to people my whole life. And so I have to be really careful about what I say and how I present myself. And we're gonna do this morning in this first dip is we're gonna talk about our message to our families, and we're gonna talk about what happened before and then what we do differently. Or at least I think that's what we're gonna do. We're not really sure. This is the first time we've done this, so we'll all be surprised. But those are the kind of things that I used to say and do, and I never had given it a thought. I remember when I told Cliff had been sober 3 years, and I'd never talked to my son about Cliff getting sober. I had just kind of let him see that Cliff was different. And when Cliff was 3 years sober, I will never forget this. When he was 3 years sober, we were going to have a party for him at our house. And my son finally said to me, "What are we having a party for?" And so I sat it down and I got loud. I set him down and I said, have you noticed, that there's a difference with Cliff? Okay, she pushed it down, you pushed it up. Are we good? So I said, have you noticed that there's, Cliff's easier to get along with and he's been nicer and we've been having a lot of more fun? And he said, yeah. And so I told him, I said, your stepdad's an alcoholic and he used to drink a lot, and that's why we had so many fights and all these problems. And I said, and he's been sober for a while, and I've been going to meetings and I've been going to Al-Anon. And I said, and so today he's been sober for 3 years. And I'm going to cry, and I didn't think I would. And I'll never forget it. He got this big grin on his face. And then he kind of lost the grin, and he looked at it. He goes, I just thought I had done something wrong. If we don't talk to our kids and our family members, and we're not real clear with our message, I don't know the damage we're going to cause. I know I've caused a lot of damage with my kids. You're going to hear about that later, but I've caused a lot of damage. And I think it's really important that we understand what we're saying and what we're doing. And I didn't have the tools before I got here. Before I got here, everything needed to be my way. I had to be right about everything. I never apologized to anybody, not my kids, not anybody. I mean, we'd have screaming, yelling, crazy matches at our house. I never once talked to those kids about that. I never once explained any of that to them. And because of that, he thought that he had done something wrong. And so how many times do we go out through our day and we do stuff? I'm going to tell you, I've done so many things and said so many things that I think about now, and I really have to catch myself sometimes to this day. And it could be simple things like, if you're in the car with somebody and you're telling them how to drive or which way to go, why don't you go this way? How come you can't go this way? Why don't you pass this car? Why don't you pass this car? What are we telling them? You're not smart enough to drive? You don't know how to follow a GPS? I know better than you how to drive? I mean, there are things every single day that I have been guilty of telling people that they're not good enough, and then they're not smart enough, or they're not whatever enough. A couple of weeks ago, we were at a conference, and a lady came up to me afterwards, and she said, my daughter she said, we have a strained relationship now. And she said, and I'm trying to talk to her and stuff. And she said, one of the things she said to me was, Mom, how come you never told me I was pretty? And she said, the reason why I never told her she was pretty is because I was always telling her how smart she was, because she was so pretty that I didn't want her to depend on her looks. And I didn't want her to think that was the most important thing. So I was always telling her how smart she was and how she could do anything. And she said, I never thought that you thought I was pretty, and I never thought that you really wanted me around, and I didn't think you loved me that much. And that was just from something that was just simple that she didn't say, not just from stuff that we have said. We were in Texas one time, and we were at a conference, and it was a relationship conference, and I'm going to see if anybody here identifies, but apparently how you load a dishwasher in couples at houses is a big deal. I mean, apparently people have some really strong opinions on how to load a dishwasher. And we were at this relationship conference, and we were in these groups, and I mean, everybody went around and, well, he doesn't know how to load a dishwasher, and so I have to go back after him and tell him how to do it, or I do it for him, and blah, blah, blah. Well, she can't just be happy with the way. She should be lucky that I don't just stick them in the sink and leave them there. At least I load the dishwasher. And I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea there were so many issues about dishwashers. But in that deal, what happened was one person would load the dishwasher and another person would come in behind them and tell them that they didn't do it right or change it. And again, the message was, I'm so stupid, I don't even know how to load a dishwasher. Nothing I do is good enough for you. Nothing I do is good enough for you. I was talking to a sponsee just the other night, and she said, when I heard your story, the one thing that I heard was what I'd been telling my kid, what I'd been doing to my kids. And she said what they would do is they would go make their bed or clean up their room, and then I would go in behind them and do it and clean it up better and clean it the way that I wanted to clean them. And she said one day my kid came up to me and said, I never do anything right. I can never please you. So those are the kind of things that I did way before I got here, because I honestly never thought about it. Didn't know that what I was doing and the message that I gave. And now what I try to do is I try to be aware of that. I try to be aware of what I say, how I say it, and make sure that my message is intentional and pure and clean. I tried to run my son's life the majority of his life. I'm just going to tell you. I was always telling him what to do and how to do it. And when he was 26, he joined the Army, and he didn't tell me about it. And I don't mean he was at boot. I don't mean that he went to the recruiter station and came home and said, "Hey, guess what? I'm going in the Army." I mean he was in boot camp when I found out. He was 26 years old. He had joined the Army, and I'd been trying to get a hold of him, and I couldn't. And his phone kept going to voicemail. And at first, I thought maybe he was camping out or something. But then it was like 3 days, and I had not heard from him. And that was really strange for us. And finally, I called his dad, and I said, "Did Colby join the Army?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "Did he not call you and tell you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I told him to call you and tell you, Lori." And I said, "I believe you." I said, "But he didn't call. He didn't tell me." And I walked around for a couple of days thinking, I cannot believe that he joined the Army and didn't tell me. And then it was like God thumped me on the head, and I heard, "Why would he tell you? Every time he's made a decision his whole life, you've always let him know what your opinion was about that and how you felt about that. And why would he tell you?" And sure enough, that next weekend I got a letter from him that said, "Surprise, Mom, I joined the Army." And then it said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I didn't want our last conversation to be a fight. And I just didn't want to disappoint you one last time. And I hope you know that I had to make this decision for myself. And, if you don't agree with it, I understand. And if you're upset with me, I understand it. And if you never want to speak to me again, I understand. But I want you to know that I love you, and I did what I thought was right for me. And, I know that was a really hard letter for him to write. And I had made amends to my son before this, way before this. But I got to talk to him that next weekend when he finally got phone privileges. He called me, I had got to write him back. And when I wrote him back, because I had a program and I had a sponsor at this time, what I did is I told him, I said, I am so sorry that I was not a safe person to tell that you had joined the Army. And that's not on you, that's on me. It's not your fault that you couldn't tell me. I told him how proud I was of him and that I loved him. And I told him that, I never want him to feel like I would ever be to a point where I would never want to talk to him or that I would hate him. That would never happen. There was nothing he could do that would ever change the way that I felt about him or that I loved him. And then I said this to him. I said, if it ever, when he called me that weekend, I said, did you get my letter? And he said, yes. And I said, is there anything else that I need to say or do to make this right? And he said, no, Mom, I think we're good. And I said, here's one thing you need to know. If you're ever up to making a decision between disappointing me and disappointing yourself, you need to disappoint me every single time. And that has made a huge difference in our relationship, to the point that he actually calls me and asks for advice now. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, I don't have to offer it. He actually wants my opinion. It's the craziest thing. And a little over a year ago, he called me up. He called us up and he said, hey, he goes, I think he wanted to go to dinner. He's like, can we get together and go to dinner? And I was like, oh, something's up. I said, and he had been dating this little girl for about 8 or 9 months. And I said, are you getting married? And he said, well, that's what I want to talk to you about. And I said, okay. I go, well, what's going on? He goes, I want to know something. And I said, what? He goes, do you think I'm making a mistake? Do you think I'm rushing into this? Do you think I know what I'm doing? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. And and because I have a program and a sponsor and a God, what came out of my mouth was, I think you're a grown adult and you can decide what is best for you. And then he said, no, really, Mom, I really want to know what you think. I really want to know what you think. And I was like, God's tested me. And I said, listen, if this is the biggest mistake of your life, you're the one that's going to pay the price, not me. And if this is the greatest blessing of your life, you're the one that's going to reap the rewards, not me. And I think that you get to do whatever you want to do. And I'm behind you, no matter what, 100%, either way. Whatever you need, whatever you want, I'm for you. And he said, are you and Cliff going to be home in 2 weekends? I go, yeah. He goes, I think we're going to get married. And they did. They got married a year ago. That's totally different than the way I would have handled it before. I've tried to learn to pay attention and listen and figure out what my message is. And today I do things differently. Whenever he calls me with an issue or a problem, sometimes he just needs to vent and I don't have to jump in and tell him how to do it or how to fix it. And usually what I say to him, because of this program and a sponsor and my God, is stuff like this. Honey, you're a really smart guy. I'm pretty sure you're going to figure this out. Honey, I'm willing to help you with whatever you need, but I know that that this is your issue, and I know that you're going to be able to work it out. You got a God of your understanding too, and He's going to help you, and you just need to pray about it. And that's really been working out for us. He and I have a really good relationship today. He calls me or texts me almost every week, which was not the case for a long, long time. He didn't really want to hear from me, and he didn't want to touch base with me, and he didn't want to clue me in on his life. And over the last several years, for a while now, he wants me to know everything. Sometimes he tells me a little too much, and there's some things moms don't need to know. I'm just saying, but I am so grateful that he feels comfortable today, because that's not always been the case. I'm so grateful that he feels comfortable with me today. You know, when Cliff and I were together, and before he got sober, we had horrible fights, and we used to say horrible things to each other and treat each other awful. And you know, what I know today is that the only reason that was happening is because I had to be right, and I always had to win the fight. And I never thought about the consequences or the damage I did by saying those things or doing those things to him. And today we have discussions. We don't have fights. We don't even really have a whole lot of arguments or anything really today. And we were able to talk to each other and treat each other with respect, which is not something I knew how to do before I got here. It was either my way or you can forget it. And he was always wrong. I was always right. And I didn't really care about his opinion or what he thought. And when he got sober, I remember when he got sober after a while, you know, what happens to people like me is that whenever you're over responsible and you start taking care of things little by little, you find out that you're like running the house and paying for everything and making decisions for everybody, and the alcoholic is not participating at all. And then what happens is he gets sober, and all of a sudden he is aware of everything that's going on. And I always give this example, but it was something like this. One day I went to the grocery store and came home, and he's helping me unload groceries, and he was like, "Hey, can we get Ruffles potato chips instead of Lay's?" And I'm like, "We've been buying Lay's potato chips for 6 years. Why do you care now?" I mean, you know, and he was like, "I just think we should get some Ruffles instead. I think we should try it." And I'm like, for 6 years, you've never said a word. I'm doing what I want to do. And then I realized he gets a say today. You know, he has an opinion. It's his house too. Who knew? And and so I have to be respectful of that. I don't want him to feel like he's just a guest in our house. It's his house too. I have to treat him like an equal. I have to treat him like he's a responsible party now, because he is. And the things that I say to him matter, and the way that I say it matter. Today I really try to be really aware of that when it comes to him and to our kids, and what I say and how I say it. What's my message? Because what I want my message to be is, I love you more than anything in the world. And I would, you know, I'm supporting you and I'm behind you 100%. But is that what my words say? Is that what my message is? Is that what my actions are?
I thought you were going to tell where you're going to be. Text me when you get there, sir.
You can tell it.
Cliff Gooding, Grateful Alcoholic. Thanks, Lori. I don't know about you all, but before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, if somebody would have said, "Hey, write out the top 100 problems in your life," selfishness, self-centeredness never makes the list. I mean, it's not even on the horizon. I don't even know. I'm so absorbed in self, I don't even see self as the problem. And because of that it talks about in our book about that I suffer from this delusion that if I can just wrest satisfaction and happiness out of the world if I just manage well. And so sometimes when I try to manage well, what I say and what I do, they don't always match up. And I'm living this alcoholic double life. You know, I got the life I want you to see, and then I have the life at home, and I have the life at work, and I'm all broken up. I just have all these different factions in my life. And you know, my message of what I tell people, what I say, and what I do hardly ever match. They don't hardly ever match up. And I'm a guy that will tell Lori I'm going to be home. I'll be home about 6 o'clock. It's Thursday. I'll be home about 6. And, you know, I may get home Friday. And I'm confusing at best. You know, I'm a great collaborator of confusion. I bring disharmony, and I have all that stuff going on in my life, and I just confuse people. but what I say and what I do don't align. And I was a guy that I get matrimonial amnesia from time to time. I don't know if any of you ever suffer from this, but in my prior life, that would come upon me from time to time. That's why Lori likes to say she's my fourth and final wife. So I don't always match up. What I say and what I do does not always match up. And before I got sober, before Lori started going to Al-Anon, we had this. She talked about this turmoil we had in our life because I'm an enigma wrapped in a riddle. I mean, I can't be figured out. I mean, I can't figure me out. I don't know why I do the things that I do. I don't know why I say this and do something else. And it's confusing to me. It had to be baffling to her. And when I got sober, as we do, I don't know anything about the old ideas that I've brought into Alcoholics Anonymous. Just to give you an example of how that looks on a guy like me, when I went to college in like 1978, I took a computer programming course. And back then you had these card readers and these punch cards. Anybody remember this? And the computer it housed would probably take up about a quarter of this room, these huge computers. And you punch these cards out and you put it in a reader, and if everything worked right, the program flipped out on the other side. You got this big stack of paperwork, and you worked. And so if I'd have just totally gone to sleep in 1978 and I wake up in 2022 and somebody hands me an iPhone and says, here's your computer, the first thing I'm going to ask for is, well, where's the card reader? Because that's what I know about computers. And that's the kind of ideas I bring into Alcoholics Anonymous. I have an idea how things work, but I get here and try to maneuver in a spiritual world, and really things work differently here. The things that I think work in my life, or how it appears to work in my life, when I bring them into Alcoholics Anonymous and trying to live a spiritual life, they don't jive. I keep looking for the card reader and it doesn't exist anymore. So one of the big things for me in trying to get this delusion of managing well and coming into harmony with what we talk about in God's will is sometimes difficult when I'm cluttered with old ideas, when I'm trying to make those fit in the spiritual world. And so I don't know anything about relationships before I get here. I just know if it feels good, do that, right? Alcoholics, we're the greatest people on earth. I love how we date. U-Haul and a toothbrush. I mean, we just go all in early. We don't mess around, man. Until we think that looks better, and then we're over here. We're like a bees pollinating the flowers. I mean, just everywhere. Just on the whim, we're gone. But that's how my life ruled. I was drug around by my emotions my whole life. If you don't play the part that I've assigned you, if you don't play the role that I've assigned you, I'm gone. Because you don't get it. Now, I don't tell you what the role is. That would be unfair. You should just know what that is. And so I'm always bumping headlong into this. So when I get into this relationship with Lori, I have I don't know really much about commitment. I don't know much about responsibility in relationships. I don't know a lot about integrity in relationships. I'm a runner. I don't know how to stay. There's just a lot that I don't know when I get here, because I'm plagued with the specters of these old ideas and how I've operated my whole life prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the things that Alcoholics Anonymous taught me, and my sponsor early on drilled in my head about commitments, about, that if we say we're going to do something, we're going to do that. And I think a lot of the things that hopefully you get taught, and I'm not mistaken about that. People say, we don't have teachers in AA. Well, you should come to Oklahoma. People taught me how to behave. I did not know how to behave. I don't know how to act other than act a fool. That's generally how I know how to act. And so I had to be taught these things. about commitment, about responsibility, about doing what I say I'm going to do, so that somewhere in here what I say and my actions begin to match. And I'm going to tell you, for some of these, it took me a while to figure that out in my relationship with Lori. It took me a while to figure that out in my relationship with my kids. I mean, I went through and to some extent, still go through a long period of reconstruction on some of this stuff, of getting surrendered fully to this idea of God working in my life, in all areas of my life. And it's been a process. I think that's why our textbook talks about, we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, because we all fall short. We'll have a target we're shooting at, and the goal is to try the best of my ability with God's help to try to walk closer to that target. And so one of the things I would do when I got sober is I was still a huge flirt, and to some people think I still am, but now I'm just old, so I'm harmless. Doesn't mean I don't think I'm not harmless. I'm just saying I'm harmless. But we would go out to places, and I would just flirt with the hostess or flirt with the waitress, unconcerned about how it made my wife feel, unconcerned about how that looked, unconcerned about my behavior. I would just go out and I would have what I can equate today as I still had bar ways. I have bar ways. I'm married, I'm going out with my wife, but I'm still acting like I'm in the bar. Bar ways. And, it finally got to a point, and Lori would say stuff to me like, hey, I wish you wouldn't do that. And I would hear it, but I don't internalize it. I don't grasp what she's really saying to me. And I just think, well, I just irritated her. I won't be quite so obvious next time when I do this. And finally, one night, it got so bad, apparently, that she just got up and left in the middle of the restaurant. And I don't know about you, but sometimes pain is a great motivator. And when sometimes I can withstand a lot of pain. I'm a guy I'm cowboy tough. I can hang in there for a long time. I didn't get sober till I was 41. I mean, I'm a hanger-inner. I'm not a quitter. No. But what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me, the steps and the God of my understanding, is it's softened me. It's begun to rub the edges off of my life. And suddenly when my behavior begins to be such that I begin to see the pain in your eyes for the first time, I become really aware of the pain I'm causing you, to the people I love the most, to the people I care about. And suddenly what's happened here is you people have caused me to learn how to care about people, really care about them, and to really know what love means. And here I was given this greatest gift, this treasure that God had bestowed on me, and I was totally just continuing to be disrespectful to that. The message is I come home and tell her how much I love her, but I go out and I show her something different. So she can't go out with me. I mean, we're married at this time, 7, 8 years, and she can't go out with me because I disrespect her so much. And not aware, totally unaware that I'm still looking for the card reader. That I'm behaving in a way where I'm trying to find the card reader. And on this one night, it became so painful for her that she just, stormed out. And it was like God had a little silver mallet. He does that to me sometimes. Just a little silver mallet come out and just dink right on your head. That ever happened to you? Just get this, you're aware, but suddenly you become awake to the idea that, my God, this is me. And you see the behavior maybe for the very first time. And on that night, it came full frontal for me. And in that moment, I was so ashamed, so embarrassed, so disgusted with myself. I go, I can't believe that I'm still behaving this way. That I'm saying to this woman who I desperately love, who I'm still showing her something different. And that's the kind of stuff I've been doing to people forever. It came full turn for me that night with Lori, and I began to evaluate the people in my life and how I began to treat them. And I had to sit down with Lori and have a really frank discussion with her about my behaviors and my attitudes, and revisit some amends that because I'm a real believer, and Lori often reminds me that it ain't old behavior if you're still doing it. It's present behavior. I have to be reminded of that. Because I'm selfish and self-centered, what I'll do is I'll pass it off. Oh, well, I'm alcoholic. I can't help myself. Yeah, I can. Because what happens today, the way it's supposed to be, is that I'm living in the world of the Spirit. And today I have a set of principles that guide me. And Lori and I, we have this really great relationship today. I mean, we have a really solid foundation relationship. A lot of that's because of our ability to sit down and be frank with each other. She can sit down and be honest with me. If you used to be honest with me before, you could be honest with me, but if I didn't like what I heard, you would be off the Christmas card list forever. I mean, there's like the stone wall comes down. It's like I build this wall between us, and you could walk up. I could be in a group of people, and you could walk up, and you would be talking, and I would just totally ignore you like you don't exist. Indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. I would just become indifferent to you. I just don't see you. You don't exist for me. And that is such a poor way to be. It eats at my soul when I'm that way. To have indifference in my life, this lack of compassion, lack of humanity in me. And my behaviors used to be that way. It would be that way to my children. I would promise them that we would go somewhere and I can't show up. I won't be there. I would promise them we'd all go do this, and then I couldn't be there. I couldn't show up for them. And today it looks different today. I mean like I said, the edges of my defects have been smoothed out. They're not gone totally, because I don't know that they're ever just gone totally, because I have self-will. I'll just reach out and grab them from time to time. I got a buddy back in Oklahoma. He says they're not defects of character, they're defaults of character. I'll just default right back to them whenever they seem to suit me. When I get in fear, I'll just default back to them, because that's what I know. If I don't allow God in my life, that's what happens to me. That's why it's so important for us to do the things that we do. That's why it's so important we gather to remind each other, hey, remember, God's still in charge. Oh, yeah, I forgot that. Glad you reminded me. And so that looks different. That boy that Lori talked about on my 10-year sobriety birthday, I was down in about 90 miles out of Oklahoma City celebrating my birthday at a group that invited me down, and went down to do that, and Lori came down to the celebration. And that boy he was, 19, 20, something like that time. Got going on his motorcycle and drove like 90 miles to come to this event for my birthday. And this is a kid that, in my alcoholism, I just wasn't very kind to him. The first, so I got sober, he was 10. So the first, we were together 5, 6 years before that. So about 6 years of his life, I just wasn't very kind to him. I just wasn't. I was Jekyll Hyde. I'd be kind to him, then I'd be drinking, and I wouldn't be kind to him. Confusion. Producer of chaos. That's me. Best I could ever do. And I remember this kid drove down that night, and they called on him after the chip deal and asked him if he'd like to say a few words. And immediately I got nervous. It's kind of like walking into an AA meeting, and 4 women you've been dating are all lined up together with their sponsor. And nobody shared yet. That's kind of that kind of feeling, And they called on him to share, and he said this. He said, when my mom started dating Cliff, and when she married Cliff, I didn't like him very much because he scared me. That's something to have to a little boy, isn't it? To scare him. Grown man. Tough guy. He said, but now Cliff's the guy that I can go to. He's the one constant in my life. He's the person I can go to with things that I don't know who else to turn to. In the book, it talks about we're like a tornado through people's lives, huh? Sweet relationships destroyed. I'm going to tell you something about the power that I believe in, and I believe the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe the power that probably you all believe in. When Ebby and Bill got together on that day and they looked at each other, Bill looked at Ebby and said, what's got into you? And he said, I've been reborn. I'm a believer of this, that if you get the heebie-jeebies, if you're new or you're nearly new, and that gives you the heebie-jeebies, the deal is that just think of God as the great refurbisher. We're like some kind of valuable piece of property that's been pushed to the side, and we've been beat up and tattered, and God finds us. And He restores us, and He refurbishes us. Because that's the deal. God is in the restoration business. And here's what I need to tell you. Business is booming. Business is booming with God. In restoring us and restoring these sweet relationships that have been destroyed because of my behavior, because of the message I used to give. That today, with the help of the power, the steps, and the people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have the ability to portray a different message, a kinder, gentler self, a compassionate self, one that I can look to and say at the end of the day, okay, that was a good day. This was a good day. So why don't we do about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back here about 10 after. What do you say, huh?